Okay, guys, hi. I wanted to take a few minutes here, I'll be very brief, to talk about some of our assignments and our discussions from the past 2 weeks. And they're just a variety of things that have come up that I want to talk about. It's what I do. So I thought I would very quickly go through a few things with you. Um, okay, so some reflections on the pretest reflection. I like the pretest assignment. I hope you had a good time with it. All those grades are back, of course. I hope you got here a sense of how people interpret questions. Vague questions are interpreted in idiosyncratic ways, in ways we never expect. So we must be very specific in asking questions, and we have to ask questions that people understand within their own cultural context. So I think a lot of you began to get a sense of that in doing a little pretest. Take a look at my second note here. A loaded question is any question that suggests an answer, and we don't want loaded questions. There are lots of organizations out there that do, but we are researchers who don't want loaded questions. So my point here is we are not surprised when loaded questions elicit the responses we expect, but what surprises us are how many questions are loaded in ways we never expect. And that's the trick, really, that sometimes months, years after we do a survey, we realize after the fact that particular questions were prompting particular responses. A couple other points that had come from the pretest reflection that I think are worth noting again are that people generally enjoy surveys. I think this is true. When they're well done, when we give them warning they're going to be surveyed, often, of course, a survey is without warning, a phone call after dinner. But and if it's about a topic that interests them, if it's for an organization that they support, or at least they feel some goodwill toward, such as a research organization, or even more so for like a university, then people enjoy the process and they want to help us out. You also get a sense here of the iterative nature of this work. Doing good survey questions is writing questions, testing them, rewriting, trying again. This is true in experiments. This is true, certainly, we're seeing this week in content analysis, in devising content categories. And the last thing is that you can do this. There are good books on how to do surveys, and how to do mail surveys or online surveys, and you test and retest and put your survey out there, and you can do this today in the 21st century in ways we never could before. And you do it once or twice in your organization, and before you know it, you're the local expert on how to do surveys. We had good responses on the assignment to critique survey research. A couple quick things here. There is room for interpretation in data results, so I hope this is clear to you as well. That you see numbers, responses to a particular question, and you can interpret this as being strong support for something, or perhaps support that is not as strong as was expected, or any number of things. And our goal here is really to try to set aside our preconceptions and interpret data honestly and objectively as best we can. And that makes us different from a lot of survey researchers out there, especially political researchers who have a real axe to grind. Many of you looked at the Pew Research Center surveys. They're generally high-quality surveys, as evidenced by the fact that they try to contact people 7 times. I think they say that somewhere in the methodology. Someone said the response rates were running between 5 and 15%. That seems a bit low to me, though I guess not unexpected. Someone also made the point that several groups were overrepresented. In other words, they had talked to more than expected numbers of young people or a particular ethnic group. The term here is oversampled, not overrepresented. They're oversampled. And that does not necessarily mean that the sample is non-random. You can have a random sample and you oversample for often for ethnic minorities. We would do that because we're interested in studying the attitudes of a particular ethnic group. And so you simply calculate that in when you're running the data, when you're analyzing things. It still remains a random sample. Many of you noted the fact about no opinions. This is a great point. It's really terrific. We ask people about the Iran deal, a political question being asked on surveys today, and 30% say they don't like it, 20% say they like it, and 50% say they don't know enough about it or they have no opinion. And we really have to think carefully about that when that happens. While the Pew surveys used open-ended questions, they're still generally, we would call them quantitative surveys. I guess you could consider the open-ended question a qualitative approach, but it really is still a quantitative method. Finally, the last item here The survey is asked to speak with the youngest adult in the household, but this was not done for respondents on cell phone lines. And I believe this is done in order to randomize who they speak to, and also to get a diversity of young people in their sample. So I don't think it's a strictly random technique, but it's a technique used because of the non-random nature of who answers the phone. And because of that, we used to ask, we'd say, can we speak to the person who had the most recent birthday? Thinking that was a way to randomize within a household. And I think that's what's going on here with Pew. All researchers make research decisions based on a lot of different criteria. Let me give you one very quick example from my own experience. In a survey we did in California years ago, we wanted to interview teenagers and one of their parents. Okay. So we'd call and we'd interview a parent, we'd ask for permission to talk to the teenager, we'd call the next night, we'd interview the teenager. Fine. But what we found about halfway through the study was that we mostly had mothers and teenagers. And if you think about it, that's perfectly obvious. If there's only one parent in the household, it's probably the mother. Mothers are more likely to have custody. Okay, makes sense. So we had to make a research decision there. Should we continue to strive toward randomness and stick with our current method? Or was the variable of gender in the parent of such importance that we needed to begin getting men into our sample? And we decided the latter. And so what we said was, we told our interviewers, from now on, only talk to fathers, because we need to get as many fathers and as many mothers in our sample. So we gave up some of our randomness in order to satisfy another research goal that we had, which was that we needed to talk to both mothers and fathers as our project. These sorts of things are done all the time. We make these sorts of decisions all the time. Stop and take a look at this slide if you get a chance. I'm going to post the slides, but these are important dictums, all 4 of these rules. I won't pause here, but read them. Make sure you understand them. I love this comic strip. This is a good thing to remember. You had to read a chapter about studying things over time. This is called a longitudinal study. We can have longitudinal surveys, including panel surveys, trend surveys, and cohort surveys. But other methods can also be longitudinal or over time. You can have experiments going over days or weeks. Case studies might go over time. Content analyses might be studied over time. Generally speaking, we study things over time in order to get at causation. They help us get a better sense of what causes what. And finally, oops, get these all out here. There we go. I'm sorry, this my slide. Okay, there's everything. The single method that gets us closest to causation is experiments. Remember that. That's the key. And for so much research, what causes what is the holy grail. That's what we're after. What is causing people to think this way? What causes people to have political beliefs? What causes people to love a particular brand? What causes people to join an organization? This is it. This is what we want. And experiments get us closest to causation, particularly tightly controlled experiments. There are 3 elements of causation. One thing must come before the other. A comes before B. The second one is a tendency of a change in one leads to a tendency of a change in another. Okay, fair enough. So A comes before B, and then they both change at the same time. Fair enough. But the last one is that all other alternative causes can be ruled out. And this is the difficult one for us to address. And this is what a laboratory experiment can address. It controls all other factors so that the only possible explanation for the change in the dependent variable is the change in the independent variable. This is why we strive to control things so closely when we do laboratory experiments. Our interviewer will ask the exact same questions in the exact same manner of our subjects, wearing the exact same lab coat, exact same time of the day. The room looks the same every time, because who knows what might be going on. We want to control all these variables. One last word here, and that is about field experiments. With field experiments, we give up this control. We do an experiment out in a coffee shop or out in a grocery store. We give up internal validity, that confidence that the independent variable is the cause. But what we gain is external validity. An easy example to think of is, think of the sort of petty little discriminations that happen in everyday life based on gender or ethnicity. Think about whether, if you're a woman, whether you get served more quickly in a bar or tended to more quickly at Home Depot, or if the men get treated differently. Now, I don't know the answer to that, but just imagine these sorts of differences in how people are treated. How would you study that in a lab? Would you set up a fake store? But it'd still be fake. If I was a subject, I'd walk in, it's a fake store. It doesn't make sense. So we do a field experiment to study things such as that because we need that external validity. We need that real life aspect. So if we did a field experiment and we found that women are treated less favorably at Home Depot, again, if you work at Home Depot, I'm just making that up as an example. If we found that to be the case, we would always have to be suspicious that there might be other factors involved, all the other things going on when you go into a Home Depot. There's this trade-off when we take in a field experiment. We gain external validity, but we give up internal validity. That's a key idea and an important point. So that's it. I hope this is helpful, me talking about some things I thought were important. Hope you're having a good week, and I will see you online.